How's it going, YouTube community? Hope you are all doing well on this fine Sunday afternoon. This video, last night I was watching a recent video upload by S&T Young, Steve. He has got a new channel. He only has about 124 subscribers, so it might be very cool of you to go over there and check out his content. He's in the honeymoon stage of still doing it, so he's putting out a bunch of videos right now, and he's got a very cool collection. He's an old guy, and hell of a bass player. Holy shit, great bass player. And he's showing some really cool old school stuff. But the reason for this video, last night he put up a video called Love, Hate, Love Metal Albums That I Learned to Appreciate Later. And I thought, you know what? This is kind of a cool idea. I am going to do a response to his video, piggyback on his content ideas, I guess, so to speak. But hopefully in a roundabout way, give him some little bit of exposure so you can all go over there and check out what he's doing, because he's just getting started. He's doing a good job. Seems like a cool dude as well. But yes, there has certainly been some albums over the years that I bought and hated initially, but end up loving. It doesn't. What is usually the telltale deciding factor? Lack of maturity, maybe. Probably. I mean, I'm still have that problem. Not being in the right mindset when you check out the album. That's also a big part of it. Your mood and attitude could spoil your perception of an album. And then, you know, on another date, turning around and listening to the same album again, it might just suddenly click with you for no real apparent reason. But, yeah, I've got a stack of things here. Some of these might seem a bit surprising to some folks. To me, it is too, but I will say when I was younger and just getting into this musical style, I started out with Kiss as a very young kid, and went from there to heavier and heavier and heavier. You know, I got into Black Sabbath and Dio and Ozzy, and when the whole thrash metal thing started coming around, I had a friend, Scott. How you doing, Scott? If you're watching, I hope you're doing well. He started getting into it first and started introducing me to this new, exciting musical style. And admittedly, I'd hear some things and laugh at them and say, this is stupid. What's up with those vocals? This is dumb. And then, you know, a week or two later, I'd actually sit and listen to it and realize it was awesome. First case in point would be Metallica's Ride the Lightning. Fight Fire with Fire. Let's face it, on this album, it's a pretty fierce, fast, savage song, but James's vocals follow the riffs pretty verbatim. Not real interesting vocal patterns, but, you know, for a young guy hearing this in 1984 for the first time, I was instantly put off by the vocals, laughed at it, said, what the fuck, this is stupid, dumbest thing I've ever heard, of course. He kept listening to it, so I was still exposed to it, and then eventually ended up picking up my own copy of the tape and falling endlessly, hopelessly in love with it. I think as a lot of people probably did during this time. But yeah, let's start off with this. Metallica, Ride the Lightning. In a very similar situation and era, probably around the same year, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath. This is another band. I heard this on the NMC Metal Show. A DJ named Keith played some of this stuff, and my friend Scott got into this big time. And if you thought I laughed and joked about the James Hetfield vocals, you can only imagine my first impression to this absolutely amazing album. Same year as Ride the Lightning. Came out same year. Again, once I got past my initial reaction and actually started listening to this album, probably one of the scariest musical experiences I've ever had. Chills running down my neck, you know, hair in the back of your neck, stand up type thing. I was sure the devil was real after hearing this, and for good reason. I mean, King really played up the shock rock thing during the Satanic Panic era to the hilt. And this is another one of those albums that I'm glad I spent a little extra time with, because this unlocked a whole new realm of scary, very cool albums that come in the future. And King Diamond, one of my favorites. Absolutely one of my favorites. I'm just going to blow through the vinyl first. None of these are really in any order. I tried to start off chronologically, but it's out the window at this point. Next up, Always Hated. Manowar. Saw it on MTV or wherever I saw the videos for it, maybe Canada's Much Music, and thought to myself, this is the cheesiest shit from the land of Velveeta I've ever heard. And, you know, it took a lot of years, and I was writing for Metal Maniacs at the time. My friend Jeff Wagner made me a mixtape of what he figured was essential Manowar tracks. So it was like a Jeff Wagner curated best of mix that I started listening to in the car, and around the same time I saw them at the first ever Worcester Metal and Hardcore Fest. They headlined one of the nights. Blew my mind. They were great, absolutely great, and it really cemented that mixtape that I was spinning of his. It cemented that into my consciousness for sure. And now Manowar, one of my favorites. Not gonna lie, yeah, the cheese is there, but you gotta kind of roll with that when it comes to stuff like this. But there's no denying that the music is spot on, great, super powerful, heavy metal anthems, and that arm gives me penis envy. Next up, here's a band. I worshipped the first two Metal Church albums. Worshipped. I was a David Wayne fan. I love what they were doing. They had power. They had melody. They had they maybe for focus a little bit more on a U.S. Power metal power, but they were kind of lumped into the thrash realm just for, obvious reasons. The time they came out, the circles they ran in, and some of their music was fast and thrash-like, especially on the first album. But this album came along, Blessing in Disguise, and after The Dark, I probably listened to The Dark in my high school years a million fucking times. Worshipped this band. Would draw the Metal Church logo on my sweatpants or denim vest or whatever the hell. This came on, Headbangers Ball with Badlands. Mike Howe's debut singing with Metal Church. Rest in peace, Mike Howe. I didn't mind the song, but man, what a stylistic shift from their first two. This is a band obviously growing, progressing. There's a little slight change in the lineup on here. I don't know how that impacted the John Marshall's now on guitar. Craig Wells, he'd been with them for a while. Mike Howe, of course. There's more of a traditional metal feel on this stuff, and at the time, I bought the tape, and it just didn't sit with me. It's not what I wanted to hear. It was not the power, the quick, the well-written pseudo thrash metal might of the first two albums. This was a more refined, slick album, and that's not what teenager Marty wanted to hear. He wanted fast and heavy, and this was kind of a step away from that direction. It was many years. Finally returned to this album, and it clicked with me. Again, maturity. Once you realize that you don't need to be fast and heavy all the time, or evil, you start opening up your mind to other avenues, and this is definitely one of those avenues I was happy to be opened up to. Next up, I bought this record. I bought an OG press of this record when it came out from a record store in Grand Rapids called Vinyl Solution, which today, that record label name would never fly. But I bought the original pressing of this based on the cover alone and the label that it was on. This was originally on Peaceville Records. I bought it the same day I bought Entombed's Left Hand Path and Bolt Throwers and Battle There Is No Law on vinyl. And that is Axegrinder, Rise of the Serpent Men. Needless to say, I hung on to this record for years and years and decades, and ended up selling it on eBay when I needed money because I thought this album is just kind of substandard. Kind of wannabe crust punk take on Amoebic's going Bolt Thrower. These guys are from the UK as well. And I got rid of it, and I sold it for a lot of money. The original pressing of it, I sold it for probably $150 at the time. Back then, it was a lot of fucking money, and I needed it. Then I found myself revisiting it online, falling in love with the record, and thinking, what the fuck was I thinking? And picked up a smart repress of it, which is pretty accurate to the original, to be honest. Again, this is Amoebic's slash bolt thrower, powerful bolt thrower-esque style music. I mean, you could tell there's a crust element to this metal. It's really good. At the time, I don't know why it wasn't clicking with me. I don't know if it was just the hardcore influence, which I've always liked hardcore to a certain extent, but again, it was during a time where I just kind of wanted one thing, and it wasn't providing it for me at the time. Of course, it was all mental issues, but this is a great record. Watch this. I'm going to slip this right in there. Goes out to you, Simon. Next up, I came across Celtic Frost first. They were my first discovery when it came to the heavier side of thrash, even though Celtic Frost really doesn't strike me as a thrash band. I came across Hellhammer later, Apocalyptic Raids, and honestly, you know, yeah, I could hear the Celtic Frost in here, but this was really juvenile, a mess. I just wasn't the level. I mean, obviously Celtic Frost progressed sonically, and you know, they refined their sound a bit. This never really fully clicked with me until a while later, until I started realizing the simplistic genius of it. And for the time this came out, is there a year on here? 84. Again, this is the whole time Metallica. You know, this was certainly not as refined and powerful as Metallica and Slayers of the world, but there was a darkness here that inspired. This is first wave black metal shit to me, and at the time I wasn't really aligned with it until late. Like I said, later. Obviously, after Celtic Frost really took hold with me, then as I started to appreciate Hellhammer a lot more. I actually had a Noise International cassette reissue of this from back in the day. But this was a grower for me. Of course, now I think it's great. I don't listen to it often. I would rather listen to Celtic Frost most of the time, but this is still a good album. Next up, a band I was quite excited about and shown numerous times on this channel, and that is Dead Brain Cells from Canada. Their first album to me is an overlooked thrash metal classic. The self-titled Dead Brain Cells. Their second album I was madly excited about getting. When I saw it show up in the store, I was fucking psyched. The simplistic cover of DBC Universe. This is their second and final album before disbanding. And this album is a complete stylistic shift that I listened to it a lot because this came out during a time that, you know, I could only buy so much music a month, because I was young. I wasn't graduated from high school yet. I had a shitty allowance. So I had to kind of pick and choose, and even if you bought something that you didn't enjoy that much, you still spent time invested in listening to it, trying to figure out why you didn't like it. Nowadays, that's not the case. You listen to something once, even things I think people like now, the whole digital age, even shit they like, they process once and then move on to the next thing, especially the older you get and the bigger collection you get. But this was an album that was over my fucking head. It lacked the power and intensity of the self-titled debut. It was more spacey and strange and really weird chord progressions, and instead of this bombastic yelling hardcore thrashy yell style, it was more of a plainly spoken, like he was speaking over these strange chord progressions. You know, later on I would compare this to a fellow countryman Voivod influence. I don't know if that was exactly what they were going for here, but this was a definite change. It sounded like a different band in a lot of ways. It grew on me, and I never really truly hated it, but it was not what I was expecting. And back then, I was a lot less forgiving of progression, evolution, all that stuff. And this is certainly, they evolved really fucking quick from their first album. Very strange album, but I listened to this recently, and it holds up. They're kind of ahead of their time in a lot of ways. I'm still not a huge fan of the vocals, but I end up really liking this record. Next up, let's go to black metal. This is a band. Their first album in particular is one of my favorites in the Norwegian black metal scene. Their second album strikes me as a treatment, a throwaway album. And a lot of people would say that's not true. So I was pretty excited to check out Nathan's Madrigal by Ulver, their third album. And what initially made me dislike this album, I think, was a common occurrence for everybody that first dragged their ears across the sounds of this album. It is super shitty production. It's all treble, no bass. Completely acidic sound coming out of the speaker. So it was very much repelling to the listener. I ended up having to review it for, I can't remember, I might have done it for Worm Gear, I might have done it for Maniacs, I don't remember. I've done so many reviews over the years, I don't remember where. So I started spending some time with it, and something great happened. I actually was able to work past the overly caustic sound and heard the music. And the riffs on this album are amazing. This is probably one of the 5 to 10 best black metal albums from the second wave, and it's all because of the songwriting. The riffs are great. The songs are well structured, super interesting, very fast, and Garm's vocals are just a scathing attack, which is made even more offensive by the production being so treble dominant. This is a great album. I ended up loving it. Love it to this day. But man, when the first few times I heard it, I'm like, what the fuck happened? Next up, let's get into some tapes. Early on, big Slayer fan. First 3 albums, the first and the third being my favorites. I still love Hell Awaits, but to me, the first album is the most unique of the Slayer albums. It's got my favorite riffs on it. It's got some of my favorite songs they ever did. Rain and Blood is a straight up speed metal attack that I've always loved. The songs are short, to the point, and lethal as hell. So it was with great anticipation I ran to the store and picked up South of Heaven when it came out on cassette, because that was my medium of choice back before the CDs thing really fully took off with me. It was tapes and LPs, mostly tapes. So South of Heaven. First couple listens of this, disappointed. Super slow. I mean, looking back now, a little bit of maturity and years and to process the material on this album. Obviously, they couldn't go faster. They kind of topped out their speed with Rain and Blood. They essentially made a hard album to follow up, and they did so by going the opposite direction, which it still sounds like a Slayer album. It just sounds like a slow Slayer album, which at the time, I wasn't feeling it. I wanted Rain and Blood Part 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this was not it. It wasn't until a year or so later of sitting down with this tape and trying, and maybe, assimilating some other styles of metal along the way, that I was finally able to enjoy the songs on this album. Still to this day, I don't own a CD or the LP of it. This is the original tape that I bought. It is so... I didn't want to pursue it further, even though when I put it on or listen to it online, this definitely turned around for me. Next up, this is this is a tough one to admit maybe, but Judas Priest Turbo. This is like one of the very first Judas Priest albums I ever bought when I was a kid, when it came out. Came out around the same year that Somewhere in Time did. I was a Maiden dude, and I preferred Maiden. This album just seemed like candy-coated Maiden attempt. They had the guitar synths going on here like they did on Somewhere in Time, where Maiden used it in a more subtle manner to create atmosphere and build textures. Judas Priest kind of put it right out there in the front, right in your face. The keyboards were very obvious. It kind of made these songs a lot poppier. So yeah, this album never fully clicked with me, and it's always kind of been a black sheep in the Judas Priest discography. But I recently reacquired it, just because I heard a couple songs online that brought back the nostalgia. I had listened to this tape back in the day enough to get to know it, And, you know, songs like Turbo Lover, Locked In, I don't know. I ended up liking this album quite a bit. I don't know if it was just a nostalgia thing, but I totally turned around on it. I appreciate the cheesy factor of it. There's no denying Halford's vocals are great. This is a good album if you're willing to overlook the more commercial intent behind it. Here's another band that I was one of those, only the first album is real, and that is Suicidal Tendencies. I'm a big fan of their self-titled debut. I think it's a great hardcore record, probably one of the best ever put out in the U.S. And the one after it, Join the Army. I recently picked that up. I recently started getting some Suicidal Tendencies stuff, and this album is basically a thrash version of that early material. It's got Mike Muir. He's got certainly a distinct singing style. The riffs on here are sharp. The production is sharp. It's a decent thrash album. I was so sick of this shit when it was out on MTV's Headbangers Ball. They played it a lot. I just wasn't gelling with it because it wasn't what I wanted to hear. But, you know, having decades behind it and picking this up again, I enjoyed it. Am I listening to this all the time? No, I'm still going to be grabbing for the first album. But I can put this on and enjoy it. By the way, in the background, before I go on to the last stack of stuff here, Rage, Secrets in a Weird World. This is another one of those albums that back in the day, I picked it up because it was on Noise International. And didn't fully gel with me. I didn't quite get it, but nowadays I kind of get it. They got way better after this, but good stuff. Next up is a huge one for me. This album, when it came out during a time where I was ravenous for Voivod. I loved all their early stuff. Nothing Face, I ended up loving it, but it was kind of a commercial shift. An obvious commercial shift. They did it really well. So I had no idea that when Angel Rat came out, I bought it on tape, and I fucking hated it. Panorama, the first song on it after the intro, had like a rocking guitar line on it, and that is exactly the opposite of what I wanted to hear from Voivod. Clouds of My House had more of an older spirit to it. The Prowl, Best Regards, Twin Dummy. Man, I was pissed. I remember throwing the tape around the room saying, what the fuck, Voivod is shit now, what the fuck happened? And I held on to that mindset for quite a while. I ended up liking The Outer Limits that came out after this. I thought that was a step in the right direction. But this album, for the longest time, did not sit well with me, and it wasn't until, again, my friend Jeff Wagner pushing me. He's a big proponent for this record. To get back into it. And I found a used copy of it at a long gone record store, and after many, many years of maturity, I ended up reconnecting with this album, realizing that it didn't have to be Dimension Hatros. It didn't have to be Killing Technology to still be good. And do I love this album? I'm not at full-on love with it, but I sure do like it a hell of a lot more than I did when it came out. I remember it was like a personal attack. It was a personal fuck you from Voivod when I put this on for the first time. But good stuff now. Next up is another one. You'll notice that Jeff Wagner has been kind of a big part of my formative years, and Mayhem's Grand Declaration of War. I remember when this thing came out, I fucking hated it, and remember the three-way conversation that we would have between myself, Wagner, and my friend Craig Zoller, who both loved this album. I just couldn't get it. I thought it was frail sounding. I thought it was confused. I thought it was lost. I thought it was pretentious. Every negative adjective you could pull up, I thought about this album. And I used to love stirring the pot with those guys because they would just get so passionately defend it. Well, something happened over the years. A lot of years have gone by, and I put this on, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it clicked. And I guess I had to come around to it on my own, because I end up loving it. And now, whenever I reach for Mayhem, it's typically this is what I'm putting on. It's just got a really, the production is weird, but it sounds good turned up. The songs, I've never been a big fan of Maniac's voice, but for some reason it kind of works on this more electronic, martial, industrial, high-strung sounding album. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, I made a complete 180 on this thing. Enjoy it now. I mean, do I like it as much as De Mysteriis Dom Satanas? Probably not, because I'm a big fan of Attila on that album. For me, that album is made by Attila's vocals. But I got kind of burnt out on that, so it's kind of nice having this to circle back around to. Staying with Norway. Emperor. 9 Equilibrium. Kind of the same thing. I was such a huge fan of Nightside and Anthems. This is an obvious step into more progressive territories, and it was not what I wanted to hear. It still clings to the Emperor sound. It sounds like Emperor. It just seems more highbrow, more pretentious. But there's still good songs on here. Curse You All Men, an Elegy of Icaros. And it was just having those couple good songs on there and actually going and buying an actual copy of it. I always had the promo sleeve of it, which just tended to get lost in my collection. And you know, taking some time and getting back into this, I end up liking it a bit more. Do I like it as much as Anthems? Absolutely not. It's kind of a departure for me. I think a lot of people kind of gravitate to this one more. I don't know. I'm guessing, because this was pretty fucking popular when it came out. And I can also say the same for Prometheus. Again, really super talented. It's obviously the Eson experience at that point, who can write great songs, but man, it lost the atmosphere and that dark majesty of the night sky atmosphere that was on the early couple albums and the demo. Ended up liking this, but I certainly didn't like it when it came out. Let's go back a little bit here in time. Yeah. Trouble, self-titled. I was a big Trouble fan for their first 3 albums. I love the doomy feel. They had a depressive slant, especially the albums like Run to the Light, which is my favorite Trouble album. This thing came out. It's on a big label. It's on American Records, or Def Jam, or Def American Records. Way more Sabbathy. There is a Sabbath contingent to this sound, the stoner rock, and there was always maybe an element of that, but they always had more of a traditional metal, traditional doom feel on their first 3 albums. This here, they obviously embraced the bell bottoms and embraced the holy denim clothing, and obviously, at the end of my days, I was never really a fan of, but all of a sudden, after trying on this album, it finally clicked for me. It might have been years after this came out, because I just did not enjoy the stoner vibe on it. But now, I mean, The Wolf, great song. R.I.P., great song. Black Shapes of Doom, Heaven on My Mind. This is one of those albums where the second half of the album is a little bit better than the first half, but I enjoy it now. It's a great album. I love Bruce Franklin's guitar tone. He's just got such a soulful, bluesy tone and way of playing, which is great. Next up, this is another album. I enjoy Carnivore. Loved Carnivore. I loved Retaliation. When I heard Typo Negative's Bloody Kisses, it was kind of a what the fuck happened moment for me. This was the first Typo I heard. It wasn't until getting a promo of October Rust that I'm like, wow, this is a great album. It's kind of like the Barry White for Metalheads album. This album always kind of remained standoffish for me. I never really fully liked it, probably because everybody and their brother loved it. It wasn't until I read Jeff's book, Souls at Zero, Souls on Fire. Souls on Fire. By Jeff Wagner, depicting retelling the story of Peter Steele's life. I got more of an appreciation for the guy, and it made me really want to dig into their catalog, which I have done so now and love. I think they got better as they went. This is still kind of a confused, am I carnivore? Am I going to lean into this Sisters of Mercy goth thing? Some good songs on this. I used to hate it. Now I think it's good stuff. Here's another one of those things where my earlier years of wading into super nasty death metal, I wanted to keep it nasty. I wanted to bottle that essence and enjoy it on every album following of bands that I enjoyed. Pestilence was no exception. Martin Van Drunen out of the band at this point, and he obviously has a voice that is single-handedly enchanted death metal singers for decades, as was it last year or the year before. Every single band that came out, from Skeletal Remains to I don't know, countless others, were trying to employ that dry, dehydrated Martin Van Drunen drawl. The way he screams is just super unique. A lot of people trying to mimic him, but he was gone here, leaving, was it Patrick Memeli? Is that his name? Yep, Patrick Memeli. Lead guitarist for this band. He ended up assuming the vocal role. Similar, but a little more polished. And as a matter of fact, this whole album is a lot more polished. And again, not what I wanted from Pestilence. I wanted it to stay Consuming Impulse Part 2. But the more I delved into this album, it ended up clicking. It's a really good album. It sounds Floridian, oddly enough, as it was probably recorded. I'm not going to look. I would imagine they've flown over and recorded in Florida. Don't know for sure. Not going to sit here and research it. Doesn't matter for the purposes of this, but the only thing that still bugs me is all of the interludes in between the songs. This is one of those albums where those did not age well. But for the most part, this is a great album. Is it as good as Consuming Impulse or Malleus Maleficarum? No, but it's really good death metal. I've got 2 more here, and we're done. 3 more here. This one, I remember getting this as a promo. In fact, this was the promo, the actual promo. I got it, was excited about it. I put it on, and I remember laughing my ass off. How I thought it was super cheesy. It was pop. And as a matter of fact, this album spent some time in the garbage can, because I took it out, put it in the case, threw it in the garbage can. That is Paradise Lost 1 Second. I started feeling a little bad because I had to review it, and I'm like, you know what, I shouldn't throw it away. I could at least give it to somebody, but I need to review this thing first. So probably about my 3rd time through this album, something happened. It clicked. The super simplistic musical lines and pop sensibility, clean singing. It's just a well-written, dark pop album, and it connected with me pretty hard. I was kind of taken aback. And kind of a similar thing happened with Amorphous' Elegy. I loved the early Amorphous stuff. In fact, these 2 bands could have sailed a very similar trajectory. I was a big-time Amorphous fan. I loved the early death metal stuff, and when they put out Elegy, I remember laughing at that too, thinking, what the fuck happened? This is a very similar album. I mean, Draconian Times, I kind of laughed at that too, but again, ended up growing on me. So, I mean, I should have known to give it a chance before I just turned my nose up at it, but hated it, ended up liking it. Next up. This is kind of a similar thing. This Germany's Nightingales came out during a time where everybody was trying to emulate the Gothenburg Swedish melodic death metal sound. And on this album, Towards the Twilight, this sounds like a Swedish Gothenburg melodic death metal album. And at the time when this came in, I was so burnt out on it. I didn't care how good it was. You know, bands like Sacrilege, Everdawn, the Gardenian. I mean, shit like that all sounded the same to me. And these guys were certainly in that realm, in that wheelhouse. I ended up getting rid of this promo along with Thunder Beast and the subsequent albums that came after it. They just, to me, just were inferior carbon copies of their influences. Years later, I revisit this album. It might have been due to Jurgen video. You might know these dudes. But I started reinvestigating this album and realized that it was really good. And I was just impacted by the fact that I had heard so many clone bands during that time doing the magazine and writing for a bigger magazine that my opinion was jaded by that, which was the same thing happened with brutal death metal, and that's what turned me towards black metal. But good album. Check out Nightingales Towards the Twilight. And my last album for this, I figured let's pick something new because this is still a phenomenon that's happening with me. I am quick to judge sometimes. I am quick to turn up my nose and scoff at something. And when this band came across my radar, I remember seeing some videos, and they are the kings of the Velveeta land. This is the absolute pinnacle of cheese. I know this going into it. I hated it. I laughed at it until I spent time with it, and I was in the right mindset. And it hit me at a time where I was listening to a ton of European power metal. Gloryhammer. This is Legends from Beyond the Galactic Terror Vortex. And yes, I know, this shit is super cheesy. They look like the Reject Avengers, dressed up in their tights and their fake armor. It's got members of Ailstorm in it, which is another joke pirate band. And I guess that dude is doing another band. I can't, Wizard Throne or something. I don't know. Whatever it is, the songs on this are so well crafted. They're like a poppier metal version of Sabaton regarding space and unicorns and galactic magical backpacks and hoots and the Kingdom of Dundee. It's all in here. It's super fucking cheesy. But one thing that made me stick with it and listen to it is my kid liked it. And, you know, as an aging father of a son who is a preteen, he is just starting to get into his teenage years. Any little metal thread that he grabs a hold of, I want to encourage, of course, because I am sick of listening to his garbage music. Let's be honest. And he loves this. He loves this Gloryhammer. He loves Halloween. So I ended up picking up all three of their albums, and I love it. It's so cheesy. It's so fun. I feel dirty. I feel very dirty, but man, it's so good. And I'm looking forward to another album. I'm looking forward to other bands that are in this ilk, just because it's fun. And I get, you know, the super dark and depressive shit, it tends to wear down my psyche after a while. And I'm realizing the older I get, I need more positivity and fun to keep my pH levels balanced out a little bit in my brain, if you know what I'm saying. But I know this is cheesy, but give it a listen. It's super fucking catchy. It's super fucking fun, and you can't deny that. And if you do, you're dead inside. Dead. But anyway, that's it. Again, Steve Young, S&T. What's the name of his channel again? S&T Young. Go over there and subscribe. I'm going to put a link to his video down into the description so you can go see which albums that he initially hated but ended up liking. And we'll go from there. Tell him Marty Worm sent you. And you guys all have a great fucking day. Where's my camera? Have a great day.